So we expect everybody to, of course, govern themselves accordingly. All lines are muted to avoid background noise. If you could mute your computer mics, that'd be great, and obviously it avoids echo feedback. And we'll be taking questions at the end of today's presentation, so please feel free to type any into the chat box on your on your right-hand side. And we'll try and get to every question that we possibly can. Those that we can't get to, we'll go ahead and email them to Neustar, and they'll be able to then respond accordingly. So let me go ahead and introduce our two presenters who will take over, Mitch Young and Michael Menzel. Mitch, if you want to go ahead and take it.
Great. Can you hear me?
Can hear you fine.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're excited to be here. I'd like to thank PACE for putting this webinar together. We have, as Neustar, have a long relationship with kind of customer engagement, especially call centers and the telco world of phone data. We've certainly come a long way, and we start now to talk about not just people and phone intelligence and call center insights, but really connecting people, places, and things. And it all comes back to authoritative identity, which has been really the hallmark or the foundation of what we've done at Neustar for a long time. And we've continued to evolve and build on that, and we have some real exciting things to share. So in terms of kind of housekeeping, here's the agenda for today. We're going to start, and I'm going to cover the first two sections, which is really looking at some broader identity and market trends, a bit broader than specifically at the call center, but we're going to talk and look at the evolution of identity and its use within different markets for customer engagement. And then we're going to talk specifically about 4 applications in the call center. And I'm going to cover those. And as a little bit of background, I'm the Executive Director of Identity Solutions at Neustar. I've been with the company for 13 years and came through the acquisition of Targus Info. The third and fourth parts, Michael Menzel, who runs our data analytics group, is going to walk through some specific client case studies. We're actually going to look at 2 applications. We're going to look at data, some of the operational efficiency gains, and some of the ROI that we've been able to deliver for some clients that we're working with. And it's always exciting to really look at how we can make things actually work and bring some efficiency into the call center and customer engagement environment. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. So I think from a timing perspective, we probably have 30, 35 minutes of content. I tend to talk a little fast, so we'll go a little quickly in the beginning, take our time on the data, and then happy to open it up for Q&A at the end, and we can go as long as we need for the hour. So the biggest trend, and if we start with the trends, the biggest trend in the next decade is that we're living in an increasingly connected world. And I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. We all, as consumers, live it every day as we move between our digital devices and our physical devices and our life and all the myriad of ways we can now interact and connect. And that is the trend that when we look at identity, we look at identity within this connected world, and what does it mean for companies that are looking to engage with their customers in this world. In the connected world, the customer takes the center stage, right? And when we deal with customers, identity is the heart of knowing your customers. And now, beyond just the call center for companies, people have multiple browsers, multiple devices, they're getting direct mail, they're getting email, they're interacting in a call center. The number of consumer touch points is growing at a hectic pace. And the good news is that consumers are providing valuable pieces of identity across all these touch points. They're giving names, they're giving emails, addresses, phones. They're even giving up their intent, right? Their intents, their attitudes, their browsing and buying behaviors. The challenge is much of this data is fragmented and siloed within an organization. And it's actually very difficult to get a single view of that consumer when they're working across all these myriad touch points. And sometimes consumers provide good information. Sometimes they provide bad information. So getting that clear picture is hard. I think the stats that we see show that most companies can only identify about 40% of their customers and prospects across channels. I think within the call center itself, we see on average companies can identify 50 to 60% of inbound callers if they're customers. And prospects are a different animal altogether. So, and I think it's fair to say, if you think about yourself and your habits, I know this is true for me. If I go and sign up for a loyalty card, I may provide one email at a point of sale in a store, and it may be very different from the email that I use on Facebook, and that's different from an email I use to make an online purchase. So the sheer quantity of data that all of us provide as we transact is, on one hand, a huge opportunity, and on the other hand, very difficult for traditional CRMs and data management systems that struggle to turn that quantity of data into actionable intelligence about an individual. So from our perspective, if you don't get identity right, it's very challenging to get other things right. Everything becomes wrong without a unified view, especially when there's different systems within an organization that may be dealing with the inbound calls into a call center, or outbound notifications, or dealing with digital web visitors. And I think what we see now, even within call centers, is the convergence of contact is growing, where call centers are sometimes chatting with people across browsers and then dealing with people in a call center, and trying to understand a single interaction or understanding who that single person is through those different interactions is very challenging. So without a single view of identity, all of these interactions become very challenging. So we see it, I think two worlds, right? There is the physical world, which is our address, our phone, our home, our TV, the physical world that we've always lived in, and then this new big digital world, which is all of our tablets and mobile devices and chats that we're working with. And the challenge is I'm trying to do all these things in the middle, and there's not a good way right now of tying those things together, right? When we're talking about, chatting and calling and dealing with inbound customers on the web, and from a customer experience perspective, trying to understand that person across these two worlds is the challenge that we've taken on at Neustar, because we've lived very much in the phone world for a long time, and being able to understand that offline identity, with very accurately and very currently. And now understanding who that person is in the digital world is where we've evolved. And we know it's hard for most companies, and I think the reason that it's hard is that consumer data is constantly changing, right? Some basic stats that people don't often know is, every year 75 million consumers change their phone carriers. 45 million consumers change their phone numbers. 60 million people relocate. 2.1 million people change their name. You get the idea in terms of the complexity and the pace of change. The other thing that complicates managing all this data is that data used to be somewhat easy to get, right? It used to be your name, your address, your phone number was all publicly available data. They used to print it in a book and deliver it to your doorstep. And the amount of data, of publicly available data, has declined precipitously over the last 15 years, where now there's very little publicly available data. So being able to get access to data and get a comprehensive view of core contact information is actually, has become more and more challenging. The impact of that on a CRM system, we actually see that CRM data can degrade up to 15% even in a given month. And over a year or 2-year period, we see that upwards of 60% of records can become inaccurate, even when people are doing basic cleansing and basic management of their data, it's still very challenging to keep up with, a very current and accurate data set. And that has impact, right? Understanding it impacts knowing who your customers are. It impacts the efficiencies of your interactions, and it impacts your ability to personalize those interactions. And so what Neustar is focused on is actually connecting that physical and that digital world. So we can bring one single lens of the customer authoritatively across people, places, and things. So when people show up on a browser, we can, bring insight into who that individual is. When they show up in a call center, we can bring insight into who that individual is. If you need to deal with them across direct mail channels, TV channels, whatever it happens to be, we can provide a single lens into that individual so companies can understand who they are, can target them better, can market to them better, can personalize interactions with them better, and can live in this new connected world. And we're going to show you how we can apply these to the call center through some of the 4 applications and some of the case studies that Michael walked through. But building on this, who is the customer, we go one step further, right, with enriched customer intelligence. So at the core, we have the identity of this individual. Somebody with, a very current and accurate view into somebody's name, address, landline phone, mobile phone, email address, digital insight, or kind of their digital devices. And then we bring an additional layer of insight, which is really, what's this person like? Insights about their demographics, their interests, attitudes, and behaviors. And these insights can be used for real-time segmentation and for modeling to deliver personalized, relevant content, right? We can help qualify a returning customer for a new offer based on, let's say, their frequency of travel, the number of children they have, maybe their financial investments. So you can figure out how best to personalize and deal with a particular individual, or get those insights on an unknown prospect. So all of the data that we have really is built off very comprehensive and authoritative online and offline data sets. And I'll walk through this. This is like the big build that our marketing team put together, which is authoritative identity, connecting people, places, and things. The challenge is, how do you take all this disparate data and link it to one individual? And the way that we do it is there's really 2 key factors that enable us to do it really well. One is that the sources of our data are very authoritative. They come from telco, government, utility, digital, where people have authoritative billing, direct, recurring relationships with individuals. So there is confidence in those feeds. And in the sheer volume of the data that we're getting in. 11 billion daily updates come in as we see, the network effect of all of the business that we do, where we can corroborate these source feeds that we have coming in to have tremendous accuracy and tremendous currency in being able to link all these disparate identity and insights about an individual together into one system. So we say, and we let the data prove it in tests, and I think Michael will show you this as we walk through some of the case studies, and we also love to test and prove out and let the data do the talking, is that Neustar maintains the world's most exclusive, reliable, and up-to-date identity sources available anywhere. And I think being able to link this physical world and the digital world and the insight we can provide, demonstrates this claim. So as a little takeaway or a little background, the things that we do that have given us such tremendous access to data is really our start is in the telecommunications industry. And we do so many things where we say, hey, the telecommunications industry selected us to help them manage identity. And we do right now a few core things. We power a large percentage of all the U.S. caller ID. We manage and put out daily all the U.S. directory assistance data. We're a North American numbering plan administrator and currently managing local number portability. As an expert in phone identity management, some of the things that we do in industries outside of the telco industry is, we help manage phone identity for 10 out of 10 top U.S. banks. We provide a tremendous amount of insight into the U.S. Census as they're, taking the census. We provide insight to every law enforcement agency. We power identity verification for over half of all U.S. online retailers, including companies like Amazon, PayPal, eBay, Walmart. And we're verifying about 1.4 billion consumer identities each day. We like to say we get measured every day by a record of one. And that's why we have such authoritative data that can be used within the call center for customer experience and engagement and marketing. And the last is certainly, and this has been relevant in the call center space and really across most verticals lately, is we're a leader in TCPA risk mitigation. Really the only company mentioned by the FCC, named as a resource to help companies manage for reassigned phones. And I think that just is built off the unique relationship we have with the telco industry, the type of data and insight that we have and can offer from an accuracy and currency perspective. And again, we work across government, finance, communications, with a focus on authoritative identity for, the last 20 plus years. So from our perspective, we have this One ID system, which really works to help companies across many different divisions, many different units for lots of different consumer communications to help them be more efficient, more productive, and more accurate. And those help within the call center, within the online world, within marketing, back-end analytics, compliance, outbound notification. And a One ID system and an enterprise ID system helps to turn each one of those needs for more effective communication to business improvement. And we've seen the benefit of each of these across the companies that we're working with, and companies, depending on where they are and which business unit we're helping, have a different lens or a different focus. Sometimes we're focused on operational efficiencies. Sometimes we're focused on reducing call times. With TCPA, we're focused on compliance. All of it looks at reducing costs, increasing profitability, higher customer value. But without a doubt, having a good identity within the, as a core system can help drive improvement across all of these. So that's, an overview of identity, trends that we're seeing in the market, and certainly the emergence of this physical and digital world and the convergence of that connectivity and trying to bring insight into call centers and all units within a company. So what does it mean for the call center? There's 4 specific applications within a call center that we're going to walk through. 2 of them I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and we're going to let him walk through actual case studies. So from a call center perspective, these are the things that we're helping with. The first is, a simple question, but a challenge. Is that my customer calling? For a lot of call centers, when somebody calls in, I'd say on average we see the ability to identify 55% of existing customers who call in from a call center. And it's a simple reason. I enroll for service with my landline phone. I happen to be calling in with a problem. This is often for me with Comcast. I had some problems lately. I call in from my cell phone as I'm sitting on my couch, and they don't have that phone, so they can't identify me. So the impact is bad customer experience, and I don't get resolved in the IVR, so it can be a longer agent time, or I have to go to an agent at all. So how can we help people say to know if that's a customer who's calling? Well, we've done this with many large companies today. We've done it with Walt Disney. 65% reduction in call handle time using a service we call Account Link. And really the challenge for them is 10 million calls coming in each year, and there was a big drive for personalization and customer experience. And the challenge was they weren't able to identify callers in the call center. So identify callers as they were calling in. That was for existing customers as well as for prospective customers who they didn't know. So we worked with them to help them improve their identification rates, and it impacted, certainly call handle time, 65% reduction. We also were able to bring this similar capability online, and we were able to identify 40% lift in anonymous visitors to their website, which then helped them drive conversions across different channels. Same thing for Whirlpool, 60-second reduction in call time on average based on increased intelligence in the call center. So I'll talk at a high level how this works, and this is one of the ROIs and case studies that Michael Menzel is going to walk through in a bit more detail. So it's a pretty simple application. An inbound call comes in from a mobile phone number, and within a company's CRM system or customer database that they're working from, that person just doesn't exist, right? We have somebody calling in from a mobile phone, and it's actually John Smith, but they only have John Smith's home phone number, so there's no way to identify that individual. Excuse me, so it's a no match. The way it works with Neustar's system is that mobile phone comes in. We know who John Smith is. We actually have his landline phone. We know his home phone. We know his mobile phone. So we're able to identify that mobile phone, understand who it is, and link that back to a company's CRM system. So now they can be identified. And one of many things can happen. They can be contained in the IVR and resolved, and there's very little cost. Or that person can be identified and routed to the right agent, and the call time can be much less. So there's lots of different impacts that can happen. We're going to walk through a detailed case study of actually how this works and some of the ROI. Another application we're helping with is, how do I optimize my agent's time? Sometimes I have to use overflow agents in peak times. Sometimes I have to keep people on hold, and I'm not sure who to keep on hold. So how do I optimize my agent's time? Well, we've been able to work in the cosmetic industry with a company, 27% lift in gross revenue per call by routing high lifetime value customers to high-touch agents. I'll walk through how we're able to make this happen, but basically it's linking high-value customers to your best agents. We're also able to work with a healthcare client, 63% increase in enrollment. Similar application, being able to do lead scoring in the call center to better route calls and increase conversion rates. So the way this works is leveraging a bit more of the data that we have available. So an inbound call comes in from a mobile phone. We not only have the ability to understand the identity of that individual, but we have the ability to unlock in real time a lot of the propensity data, lifestyle data, demographic data that we have linked to individuals. So we can provide basic data attributes back, or we can build lead scores. So we can build out a lifetime value score based on a specific business's focus and deliver that score in real time just based on a mobile phone number. And then a company has the ability to route that particular individual, who may be a high lifetime value, to their best agents, right? Rather than sending that best customer to an overflow agent pool if it's at peak times. So the ability to understand who's calling and link them to your best agents has proven effectiveness in conversion rates and overall effectiveness. The third thing that we're working on within the call centers is TCPA. This has certainly been a big topic for many companies across industries if they're dealing with outbound calls. TCPA, I won't go into the details of TCPA, but at its core, it's making sure that when you reach out to customers that their phone number is still their phone number. It's basically making sure that you update, maintain, manage your CRM systems to be sure that phones haven't been disconnected and reassigned to somebody else. So we work with all the top 10 banks, all the large collection agencies, utilities, big tech and internet companies, And the service is pretty straightforward. We take a CRM record, a name and phone number, and we run it through our Neustar OneID system. And we're checking for a few core things. We're checking to say, hey, is this phone still in service? Can we verify John Smith still belongs to this phone? We verify the phone type. We look to make sure there's been no disconnect activity on that phone number. And then we can deliver it to a company to say, hey, this one's still verified. It's safe to keep in an auto dial environment. And that's leveraging the data repository that we're consistently managing every 15 minutes. It's constantly updated where we're letting people know, hey, this phone's disconnected. You better move it out of your dial pool because it could put you at exposure. It could give you risk exposure for TCPA fines. The final thing that we do is how do I reach prospects that didn't buy? I think this is one of the most exciting services that we've rolled out recently, and because it's leveraging, this interconnected experience, this omni-channel experience that we interact with customers. And basically what we see is the ability to really drive ROI. We've worked with a large wireless carrier where they were able to take online visitors and really convert them at a much higher rate by reaching back out to them and remarketing to them in a very quick time period. So I'll walk quickly through this use case. So let's say people call into a call center but they don't convert, or they show up on your website anonymously and they don't convert. So as a company, you're left with, you've marketed to them, you've got them to call in. Maybe they're an existing customer and you just weren't able to identify them in either one of these channels. So you have some intent. They've raised their hand and said, hey, I'm interested, but you didn't convert them and you didn't collect enough information to remarket to them. Well, this is where we're able to take some of that information and actually look into our system and say, hey, within our OneID system, we're able to look at an anonymous web visitor. We're able to look at someone that's called in through a call center, and just based on either of these actions, we can understand the individual, and we can put them through this, we call it omni-channel remarketing, which is OCRM, and we can say, hey, we can help you reach back out to this individual in any channel you're interested in, whether that's display advertising, direct mail, email, addressable TV, on social media. And it's all done through our OneID system where privacy by design is built in, but it allows you to reach people who've raised their hand and said, hey, I'm interested, very quickly within the next 24 to 48 hours to hit them directly. The results have been very powerful, and it's built on, similar direct mail shops are now saying, hey, this is great. We need a way to take web visitors and reach them via direct mail, or we need to take call center, people that have called into the call center didn't convert, and now hit them again quickly. And something we've rolled out in the last couple of years that's been really powerful. So, that's a recap on the applications of how we're leveraging the insights we have within the call center. And certainly we are, I think, unique in our view across mobile, voice over IP, and non-public phone numbers. We really have a comprehensive view across phone intelligence. And we look at it and say, the three things that we do are within the call center are certainly help companies identify who's calling, excuse me, or identify who they're engaging with, verifying this information should they be doing outbound dials, and qualifying those calls coming in so we can help you route them better and convert them better. So those are, I've walked through the first two items on the agenda, high level, identity, market trends, the connected world and where it's going, and then how we're taking that ability to bring a single authoritative lens across those, across that connected world and apply it specifically to the call center. I'm now going to turn it over to Michael Menzel, my colleague, and we're going to walk through two case studies, one on TCPA and then one on account link and identifying customers in the call center. So Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Mitch. So what we're going to dig into now is specific results that our customers have seen using some of the solutions that Mitch talked about. So the first case study is for TCPA. So in this example, this was a client in the telecommunications space who was looking to make their outbound auto dials for the purposes of bill pay reminders. So your account, your bill will be due in X number of days, or your bill is overdue. Basically that population. They wanted to make sure that was TCPA compliant, and they weren't dialing customers whose phone number was actually has been reassigned. The framework that we use for our TCPA service is we take in a name, a phone, address, email, any contact information, along with a date of consent, and we rate each one of those phone numbers by whether it belongs to the person who you're trying to reach, or whether it belongs to somebody else or has been reassigned. So the distribution here is pretty typical across our customers, and what you might expect to see if you're making outbound dials to customers. So quickly going through those codes, those possible result codes, up at the top, the 10s and 7s and 6s, those are phones that are verified. So we have a linkage between that phone number and the person who's trying to be called. On the bottom side, the 1s, 2s, and 3s, we have that phone linked to somebody else. So if we look at the table on the right, or the chart on the right, in this for this customer, 84% of the phone numbers that they had on file were wireless phones, and 16% were landline. And that's pretty typical of what we've seen across most of our customers these days. In this example, 81% of the wireless phones and 69% of the landline phones were verified. So that means that Neustar has that name or that phone or that address linked to the phone number that you're dialing. We have high confidence that you're going to reach the right person at those phone numbers, and most of our customers deem that to be low enough risk that it's okay to keep in the auto dialer, as long as you have valid consent. The next important number is the 7% of wireless phones that have been disconnected since the consent date. This means that that person has given up the phone number. The phone was linked to them at one point, but subsequently they've disconnected their line and the phone number no longer belongs to them. These are the highest risk of being, if you dial them, reaching a new user, and that's going to be the highest TCPA risk. And in phones that have not yet been reassigned, that are just disconnected, most of those are just going to be wasted dials anyway because that phone will be disconnected. So when we look at landlines, we often see results like this, where the verification rates are a little bit lower. In this case, we had 69% of landlines are verified. A little bit more in that code 6, where the phone and address are linked. In a lot of cases, a landline phone is shared among multiple individuals, so you're more likely to have a scenario where the phone number is linked to the address you have, but not necessarily linked to the individual that you have. The other thing that jumps out here is the code 3s. And those are the records where the phone number does not belong to the consumer's name that you have, but they do belong to a business. And that's a lot of times where work phone numbers fall in there. We found from feedback from our customers that simply saying the phone goes with that person or doesn't go with that person isn't really enough. The added intelligence to know whether you're reaching somebody at work versus at home is pretty valuable. So we've identified those as well. So ultimately, this client receives this intelligence on all their phone numbers, whether wireless or landline, and ultimately they use this to make decisions. So in this case, this client would continue to auto dial 84% of their phone numbers. They would include in there all of their landlines and just the verified wireless phones. 6% of their phones they wouldn't dial at all. These would be the wireless phones that have had a disconnect since the consent date, because so many of them are going to be out of service or reassigned. Finally, the remaining 10% are the wireless phones that are not verified. Neustar couldn't confirm that that person owns the phone, but we also have not seen a disconnect on the phone. So it very well may continue to belong to the person who initially gave you that consent. So the important thing here is that for a lot of customers, they're often deciding, do I auto dial all of my wireless phones, or do I remove all of my wireless phones from the auto dialer completely? And usually that's the only information that customers have to go off of, auto dial or not auto dial. What this allows them to do is come up with a dialing plan which covers both auto dialing, removing from the dialer, and then a small manageable population that could be manually dialed if they have the resources available. So switching gears a little bit, we're going to look at another case study which, rather than looking at outbound calls and whether they're TCPA compliant or not, this is going to look at inbound calls and helping identify your customers when they call into the call center. Mitch talked about this a little bit for most of our clients, when inbound calls come in, they're doing automatic ANI matching. So they're matching the ANI of the inbound caller to the phone numbers that are found on the CRM file. And if they make a match, there's a process in the IVR to authenticate that user, hopefully contain them in the IVR without transferring to an agent. But in some cases, at least going to an agent with that already authenticated with their account information popped up on the screen. What we're going to help with is identifying those callers that are not already in your CRM with that phone number. In this example that we're going to go through and the subsequent ROI is going to be for an insurance company, mostly auto insurance. So their current process, they had an unidentified inbound caller. This is a wireless phone number. They attempted to make a match in their CRM using just the phone number. In this case, no match was made, so they now queried Neustar. With Neustar, that same phone number comes into Neustar service, and we're able to, first of all, identify who it is. It's Patrick Smith. Neustar has his address, email, and another alternate landline phone that belongs to Patrick. But also at that household, we have two other individuals. We have Camille and Lauren. For Camille, we have her wireless phone number and her email address. For Lauren, we have a name and an email address. So potentially all of this contact information can now be linked to that inbound phone number. So what we do is we compare that to this insurance customer's CRM data, and we find a match. So using that name and the address and that landline phone that we have associated with that mobile phone, we find a policy number. And we see that both Patrick and Camille are on that policy number. The addresses match. The phone number that's on that account is the landline phone that we have linked to Patrick. So this is a pretty high confidence match, and this customer can now proceed through the IVR as if they called in on a phone number that's already on record. So they proceed with some sort of authentication process, but a simpler one where they don't have to provide as much information in order to get into the system. So that was the process that we went through, and now we're going to look at actual data from this customer's inbound call population. So this client had 53% wireless phones, 45% landline, and a couple other percent that were either toll-free numbers, invalid numbers. If something was lost in the process of that inbound call coming into the call center. What we found in our analysis was a 20% incremental lift in customer identification over their current ANI to ANI matching process. So when the 20% is for calls to their customer service phone number. We found a 33% incremental lift in prospect identification. So those are calls to their direct sales phone number. And this customer, and which is what we've seen in the insurance space, they have two sets of what we call CRM data. They have their customer file, and then they also have a prospect file that they source from a third party. Ideally, they'd like to match customers to their existing customer file so they know exactly who they are, how many cars they have, whether they have an open claim, things like that. And if it's a prospect, they want to instantly know how many people are in this household, what state do they live in, what kind of rates are we looking at, what's the best offer to give them. So at the same time, when that phone number comes in, Neustar can tell you if it's a customer and if it's a prospect. So looking at this table, let's just start focusing on the customer service calls. So overall, in the customer calls, 71% of them matched with Neustar. And that 71%, 66% came from a match to their customer file, and 5% came from a match to their prospect file. If we dig into each one of those, we see that their current process, which is what would be an Annie-to-Annie match, only identified 50 or 51% of their customer calls. By using Neustar and taking advantage of all of the other phone numbers linked to every individual, we were able to increase that customer identification by 15.5%. And then when we take it and look into the prospect file, we find another 4% that we can identify that it's a prospect. We can identify exactly who it is, return all of that associated demographic information at the time of the call. For sales calls, we found something really interesting. 46% of the calls to the sales line actually matched to their customer file. So these are people who are calling this company's main 1-800 number, or a number that's advertised rather than a specific number that's geared towards customers. And so they're right off the bat, 46% of them were able to identify that it's a customer. They can talk to an agent who will have that information that this is an existing customer. They know a lot about this person already, and they can use that during the sales process if it's an upsell, or get them over to claims or customer service if it's a customer call. But then on the prospect side, there was another 20% that matched to the prospect file. With that, the Neustar lift was actually higher than the automatic Annie-to-Annie matching. So only 6% of the prospect calls matched to the prospect file, and another 14% matched to their using Neustar. So ultimately, this turns into ROI, because when you identify a customer in real time, you either A, can contain that call in the IVR, and there's very few ways to contain a call in the IVR without identifying that customer, or you can transfer it to an agent and have that customer already identified. And we find that most of our clients already have metrics around the cost savings associated with a contained call and the cost savings associated with an identified call. So going to the ROI for this specific customer, this goes line by line into how they recognize savings today. So on their customer calls, they had 7.2 million calls a year. And let me use my mouse here. And the prospect line had a little under 2 million calls a year. Just focusing on the lift, there was a 15.5% lift with Neustar in identifying customers and a 19% lift in identifying prospects. And this customer has a very low containment rate. Only 5% of calls that they identify actually stay contained in the IVR and are satisfied there without speaking to an agent. We see this a lot higher in other industries. Our clients, MSO clients, for example, have a significantly higher containment rate, because you can, and same thing with telecom in general. People are calling credit cards. They're calling to pay their bill, check their balance, things like that can be done in the IVR. At $5 a call for containment savings, you see that there's $279,000 on the customer side, $88,000 on the prospect side. And then all of the calls that are not contained but identified, there's significant savings in having that information populated on the screen to the agent, and about a minute is saved, which has significant cost savings. On the prospect side, it's very similar to the customers. By identifying who the prospect is, that pre-populates the name, the address, a lot of the key questions that are necessary to form a quote for that person, all that's populated automatically. So the net result for this customer is a $2.2 million a year savings. In this case, the cost was $617,000, so there was a little over a $1.6 million first-year ROI based on this analysis. So I believe that is the last slide. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to the audience for questions, and Mitch and I will be happy to answer.
And I think the questions can come in. This is Mitch.
Hey, guys.
I think the questions can come in via chat. So if anybody has any, we may have nailed it. There may not be any questions, but so thank you all for listening and staying with us through the duration. We'll certainly wait a couple minutes and see if anybody has anything that they'd like to throw by us.
Thanks, Mitch. Unfortunately, I was talking on mute a second ago. But yeah, please just start entering your questions into the chat window, and I'll start collecting them. We have a few coming in right now, which I can just throw out to you guys while we're waiting for some more to roll in. So the first question is, does Neustar have access to mobile phone data?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we are, I'd argue, the leading provider in mobile phone intelligence, both attributes about mobile phone numbers as well as identities linked to mobile phone numbers. So, you know, we work across a few different applications as it relates to mobile phones. One is we do a lot of identity verification work. So if you enroll into eBay or PayPal or, you know, open a credit card, we are used to verify, you know, name, address, phone, email information. Certainly 85+% of that is mobile phones. TCPA is all about verifying mobile phones. You know, that regulation is verifying that an individual is linked, you know, still belongs to their mobile phone. So, you know, we have coverage across, you know, the entire U.S.
So another question here. So what is the best way for us to engage with Neustar if we want to perform a test?
A test process, typically what we'll do is have some introductory conversations to understand business process and what the intended gains are. We want to make sure that, one, we have the data that can bring some improvements for whatever the particular use case is. And then we'd structure a test to understand what outcomes we're looking to achieve, what data is available and can be sent over, and then how we would process that and what type of data and insight we can return back. So we typically do that in a you know, custom for every company, depending on what they're trying to do. We certainly leverage core products and services to do that. But you know, every application tends to have some unique aspects to it based on the company, the types of data they have, their particular systems, what's available and not available. Sometimes there's a lot of rich data, but boy, it just can't be made available in real time to leverage. So it limits some of what we can do. So we typically take all that into account, and then we look to, in a test, structure it as close to what a production environment would look like. And the nice thing is, you know, we can do it all behind the scenes. So it doesn't require integration work ahead of time, and we can look to see, does it look like there's good business value that's created. And then, you know, once we get it structured and aligned, Michael Menzel's team takes the data and runs it and does a great job presenting the analysis back. So it's really, you know, usually a few conversations. Sometimes it's an on-site meeting, but a lot of times we can work through things over the phone and WebEx and really iron out, you know, what the use case looks like to structure a test.
Great, thanks. And on the heels of that question, another one, it might be, you know, again, a question for you or for Mike. So a lot of these match services that Neustar performs, in addition to this testing and proof of concepts, they compete with other data providers in this space, people like Axiom. So people want to know, like, how does Neustar's match rates compare to some other people who are also performing these services?
Sure. I can take that one, Mike, and then you can answer too. I'll give you kind of my view on it, and then you can talk maybe specifically about some data. So there are a lot of companies that have identity data, and I think we've all grown up kind of in different places, right? Axiom's grown up in the world of marketing. The credit bureaus have grown up in the world of credit. We've grown up in the world of, phones and identity. And everybody does what they do really well. And I would say what companies like Axiom do really well is they bring great capabilities and resources and the ability to manage data and whatnot. But in the world of marketing, there's always been a tolerance for inaccurate data. Like, we want good data, but we're not fighting fraud, so it doesn't need to be perfect. We're not making credit decisions. We're kind of managing a CRM system. For us, we've grown up in the world of identity verification, of caller ID and phone intelligence and authoritative data, and we say we get measured on a record of 1, and we have for 20 years. So for us, we've grown up in a world where there's not a high tolerance for inaccurate data. And I think those things start to impact how systems are built and how data performs. Credit services, the bureaus do a great job with credit decisioning and credit data. They don't really do a good job with phone. That's not their core competence. And their data is not really authoritative from phone. They have it, but they don't really know what they have. So I think you'll see match rates can be really inconclusive, because if I'm matching inaccurate data or disconnected data or data that's stale, a match rate's not going to tell you that. So an accuracy rate might, which is a very tough thing it's a tough measure, but you start to look at what are your sources of data and how does that impact your overall approach to accuracy and currency. And Mike, you can add on that, but that's my take across the data landscape.
Sure, yeah, I'll add a little bit to that. In line with what Mitch said, when we really talk about match rates, and obviously when you're talking about verification, that's one type of match, but a lot of times customers are looking to identify who they're interacting with. So in an example would be a purchase that's made where name, address, phone, email, everything's populated on that transaction, on that online order. You're going to find that across the board, across providers, the ability to link that back to a unique ID is going to be pretty consistent. Everybody's going to have very high match rates in the high 90%. When you have incomplete data, like a phone number only or an email only, or more commonly nowadays, a name and an email, things like that, Neustar isn't address-centric. We don't rely on an address. We rely heavily on our private, hard-to-find mobile data and email data. So in cases where the information is incomplete, Neustar will have significantly higher match rates across the board. At least that's what we've seen in some of the data tests that we've done with with customers who are using a competitive solution.
Great. So one more question again, since we have a couple more minutes left. Again, we talked, can Neustar cleanse all of my customer records to ensure the data we have is accurate and risk-free?
We certainly do CRM and data cleansing all the time. It's a core service, and I think more and more companies now are realizing that, hey, I haven't really managed my data. I don't really have a process in place to kind of manage it ongoing. So one of the first things that we do is say, okay, great, we need a baseline now moving forward, right? Let's take the data and let's cleanse it and scrub it for accuracy and for currency, so we have a baseline from which to monitor it moving forward, and to fill in gaps and make sure data is accurate and current and complete. So that's certainly a fundamental thing that we do to make sure it's accurate. Risk-free is a whole term we could define for a while of what that actually means of risk-free. But from a compliance there's always some risk, right? I mean, just being business poses some risk. So I'll push risk-free to the side for a minute because that's probably a longer conversation.
Okay, and one last question that came under the wire. With the FCC's recent change related to an official mobile phone number service provider, will Neustar's mobile phone number service change or otherwise be affected?
I don't
believe there'll be any. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
No, I was going to say I'm not sure I'm aware of any change that will affect Neustar's services regarding mobile phones.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not either. I don't know if I'm up with all the details of the most recent one, but there's nothing that I've heard, even from the FCC, that impacts kind of the services that we have, the data that we have, or any of our access or relationships to it.
All right, if anyone has any questions that come in after the wire, please just we'll make sure to follow up with you guys after the fact and make sure Mike and Mitchell get a chance to view those as well. Thank you guys, appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you all very much.
Perfect. As we wrap this up, I just wanted to thank everybody for attending today's webinar and remind everybody that the 2017 PACE Convention and Expo is being held at the Grand Hyatt in Tampa, Florida on April 2nd through the 5th, where Neustar will be available at booth 100 in the exhibitors hall and available for further questions if there are any, as well as paraphernalia. So visit paceassociation.org to register. And from PACE National and Neustar, have a terrific day.